You all probably know that when Russia invaded Ukraine 2 years ago, it's almost exactly 2 years ago, many of us said, well, this didn't come out of thin air, right? There were things leading up to it. And we pointed to many of the things that led up to this Russian invasion. And we called it a proxy war. We said the US was in bed with Ukraine, was a big part of Ukraine. And we said the US created a coup, helped create a coup. It was US-backed coup in 2014. We said that after that coup, between 2014 and 2 years ago, the Ukrainian forces, mainly the Nazis in Ukraine, had killed 15,000 culturally Russian people in the Donbass region of Ukraine. We talked about how the NATO had moved up on Russian borders. We talked about how the U.S. was in Ukraine and using Ukraine as a staging area for our ongoing Cold War with Russia. All of that was like scoffed at, ridiculed. The mainstream media said we were Putin apologists and said, obviously I lost my TV show. My YouTube channel was banned. All of that happened, right? Just crazy suppression, attacks, everything. Here is the New York Times saying how the CIA secretly helps Ukraine fight Putin. So this is basically admitting it's a proxy war. If the CIA is in Ukraine fighting Russia, then it's US and Russia fighting, right? That's a proxy war. Beyond that, they admit the time frame. For more than a decade, the U.S. has nurtured a secret intelligence partnership with Ukraine that is now critical for both countries in countering Russia. Now, again, they're saying it as a positive thing. Isn't it great that our CIA has been helping Ukraine all this time? What a good group of boys and girls they are. In admitting the time frame, what happened to nothing led up to Russia's invasion? It certainly sounds like they're admitting that there was some U.S. actions that helped lead up to the 2022 invasion. Let's read some quotes. The underground bunker built to replace the destroyed command center in the months after Russia's invasion is a secret nerve center of Ukraine's military. There is also one more secret. The base is almost fully financed and partly equipped by the CIA. And then the general at the top of the top intelligence commander in Ukraine said the base is 110% financed and equipped by the CIA. I thought the U.S. was not participating in this. I thought this was not a proxy war. But instead, we're told the CIA is funding and arming bases in Ukraine. But again, it's not just recent. This goes back years. The partnership is no wartime creation, nor is Ukraine the only beneficiary. It took root a decade ago. What? I thought nothing led up to this. Took root a decade ago, coming together in fits and starts under three very different U.S. presidents, pushed forward by key individuals who often took daring risks. It has transformed Ukraine, whose intelligence agencies were long seen as thoroughly compromised by Russia, it has transformed Ukraine into one of Washington's most important intelligence partners against the Kremlin today. It took root a decade ago. So a decade ago, 2014, the CIA was building and creating bases and platforms for their work in Ukraine on the border of Russia. Imagine how the U.S. would respond if we found out that the Kremlin was funding and operating bases on the border of the U.S. in like Mexico in order to spy on us and facilitate fighters, neo-Nazi fighters against the U.S. How would we respond? We'd be like, oh, that's cool. They get to do what they want. This is down in Mexico. Look, anything that happens in Mexico stays in Mexico. It's fine. It's fine. I don't know. We don't even care. We don't even care. We don't care if Kremlin is funding and arming people on the border of the U.S. who want to bring down the U.S. We don't. It's fine. It's fine. Is that how you think it would have gone? The listening post in the Ukrainian forest. So we're talking, not only is this former Soviet bloc countries, so this is the former Soviet allies, and this is during a time when Ukraine, right after the coup, right after the U.S.-backed, U.S.-created pro-U.S. coup, 2014, whereas we said nothing led to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right? The listening post in the Ukrainian forest is part of a CIA-supported network of spy bases constructed in the past 8 years that includes 12 secret locations along the Russian border. 8 years. So years before the Russian invasion, the CIA was building bases in the forests like a mile or less from the Russian border. And all of us who said maybe something led up to the Russian invasion were called lunatics. We were called crazy. We were called Putin apologists. We were called propagandists. And now here's the New York Times, the U.S. propaganda paper of note, admitting exactly that. The Ukrainians also helped. At least they only waited 2 years for this admission as opposed to the, 6 years for WMD admission. But the Ukrainians also helped the Americans go after the Russian operatives who meddled in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Isn't it amazing that propaganda outlets like the New York Times continue to be like, no, Russiagate's still a thing. It's still a thing, man. No. They just like won't let it go. It's like, dude, it was destroyed. And I hate Trump as much as anyone, but Russiagate was laughably debunked at every level. And I'm not going to go through it here because it was so debunked that if I were to spend time talking about how it were debunked, it would take 3 years. It has been debunked at every goddamn level. And here is the New York Times that's still like, no, man, come on. Just, can you pretend? Can we just pretend for a second? Because it was like our thing, man. It was our thing. We were totally like just so into it. And I just really liked it. Can we just, I feel like that's like most New York Times coverage nowadays is just, come on. Can we just go along with it? Just please, just throw me a bone, man. Around 2016, the CIA began training an elite Ukrainian commando force known as Unit 2245, which captured Russian drones and communications gear. Literally, the New York Times is saying that years before Russia invaded Ukraine, the CIA was in Ukraine training and funding and arming commando units to take down Russian drones, which I think is like an act of war in some cases, isn't it? They're admitting it. They're admitting it all. I mean, thank you, New York Times, for finally admitting all this. And the CIA also helped train a new generation of Ukrainian spies who operated inside Russia. So now the CIA is sending men into Russia. It's not just on the border of, it's into Russia to spy on Russia. Now, here's the thing. If you despise Russia, you may say good. You could be like, I love America. America's awesome. You got to talk in that Trump voice. America's the best ever. And you may like that the CIA was sending men into Russia, but you still have to admit that maybe a little something led to the 2022 invasion. Like a little something, like maybe the CIA was funding and arming people in like on the border of Russia and maybe sending spies into Russia and maybe taking down their drones. That sounds like something leading up to it, right? Spies who operated inside Russia, across Europe, and in Cuba and other places where the Russians have a large presence. The relationship is so ingrained that CIA officers remained at a remote location in Western Ukraine when the Biden administration evacuated U.S. personnel in the weeks before Russia invaded in February 2022. It sounds like you're kind of admitting invading, the U.S. invaded, but anyway. So this has all been, the New York Times says, this has been a closely guarded secret. And once again, by the way, can I just say this proves that I was right? Like, yet again. Like, I'm trying, look, I try and let everyone know I'm always right. And it's a fight. It's a fight to let everyone know you're always right. But it's been a closely guarded secret for a decade, turning Ukraine into an intelligence gathering hub that intercepted more Russian communications than the CIA station in Kiev could initially handle. Many of the officials spoke on a condition of anonymity to discuss intelligence and matters of sensitive diplomacy. So they're saying that years before the Russian invasion, the CIA was so like in Ukraine, was so there at such a level and it's such in cooperation with Ukraine that they were in gathering so much intelligence on Russia, intercepting Russian communications, that they couldn't even handle it all. It was just too much. Do you think that would piss off Russia? Do you think that might, in the Russians' minds, count as a reason to invade Ukraine? Maybe. Mr. Putin has long blamed Western intelligence agencies for manipulating Kiev and sowing anti-Russian. What a loony bin. Toward the end of 2021, according to a senior European official, Mr. Putin was weighing whether to launch his full-scale invasion when he met with the head of one of Russia's main spy services, who told him that the CIA, together with Britain's MI6, were controlling Ukraine and turning it into a beachhead for operations against Moscow, which, according to everything the New York Times has just told us, seems pretty true, right? They had turned Ukraine into a beachhead of intelligence operations against Moscow. So all of the things Putin was saying about why he invaded, the New York Times is like admitting most of them. In 2014, General Valery Kondratyuk, I think I nailed it. Look, can't get better than that. And if he pronounces it differently, then he's got it wrong. The Ukraine's head of military intelligence arrived at a meeting with the CIA's deputy station chief. The initial trance, and he turned over secret files, contained secrets about the Russian Navy's northern fleet, including detailed information about the latest Russian nuclear submarine designs. Before long, teams of CIA officers were regularly leaving his office with backpacks full of documents. Does any of this sound like it might be a little bit leading up to the Russian invasion? All of this that the New York Times is admitting? So anyway, this is years before the invasion. But on top of that, they talk about the night of the U.S.-backed coup in 2014, the Maidan coup. I've talked about it a lot. U.S. helped make that coup happen, make sure it happened in a variety of ways. They did it with working with Nazis, and they put into place in Ukraine a pro-U.S. leader. Now, eventually, the president becomes Zelensky, but that's a few years later. On the night of February 24th, 2014, millions of Ukrainians had just overrun the country's pro-Kremlin government. That was the Maidan coup. The government's new intelligence chief, Nalivachenko, arrived at the headquarters of the Domestic Intelligence Agency. So this is the night of the 2014 coup, or one of the nights of the 2014 coup. They have just taken over. The Nazis, aligned with a lot of other people, have just taken over the country. The spy chief goes into the offices, which are, he says, it's empty, no lights, no leadership, nobody there, okay? Intelligence agency is empty because a coup has just taken place. He goes into the office. He calls the CIA station chief and the local head of MI6. Interesting, right? On the night of the coup, he already has a relationship with the CIA and MI6. He has their phone numbers and they're in town. But the U.S. had nothing to do. The U.S. and Brits had nothing to do with that coup, right? No, that was just the people. That was just the people's will. But it just so happens that the CIA and MI6 were there and they were on speed dial and ready to show up. He went to an office and called the CIA station chief and MI6. It was near midnight, but he summoned them to the building, asking for help in rebuilding the agency from the ground up, and proposed a three-way partnership. That's how it all started, he said. This is the night of the goddamn coup. Sounds like they had a bit of a relationship beforehand, no? And that the CIA was squirreling around even before 2014. Maybe that's why there's video that I've shown before of Lindsey Graham and John McCain in 2013 in Ukraine, meeting with the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazi battalion, saying, we're supporting you and we'll give you everything you need. That's 2013, prior to the Maidan coup. All right, folks, like that article, yet again, see, the thing is I'm always right. Sometimes you have to wait like a year or two for the mainstream media to admit it. Here's the New York Times admitting it 2 years later. But the mainstream media does this. They do this where they trash us for saying Russiagate's not real, saying the spy balloon's stupid, saying that the U.S. was throughout Ukraine and, helping Ukraine, funding, arming Ukraine before Russia invaded. All these things we say, they trash us for it. And then a few years later, they go, yeah, that's kind of true. I mean, all the way back to WMD, it just goes on and on. It's just, ugh.